Oops, my phone just moved. Hi guys, how are you? Legendary Damon here, about to do a legendary talk with Cipriana Quann. She has a very interesting story that I want to share. She is a really cool and interesting person, and I'm very happy and grateful that she's right here right now. Perfect. Early. Hi.
Hi,
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Really good. Thank you for doing this with me. I really appreciate it. And I think, I'm really not excited, but I'm really, grateful that you are going to share your story with me. Or with us. So,
Well, I just want to say thank you for having me. I mean, I call your show, it's a talk show and I love it. You have so many interesting guests and the conversations that you have. It's just, I think it's something that everyone needs to see and just be aware of. So just thank you so much for having me.
well, thank you for doing it. But, just to talk a little about the show, initially I was doing these kind of, these like cultural people that needed to be celebrated, but obviously, things have shifted. And I really want to, I've said it many times, but what I realized is that things that are obvious to me are not obvious to other people. So I just want to use this platform to share kind of information, just share basically. So you mean everyone I'm having on right now, I just want them to share basically. So information. So that's what it's about right now.
Exactly.
But I do want to talk about you first a little bit before we get into, what we're here to talk about. First of all, we have something in common, you and I. we,
Yes.
we both have a mutual obsession. For those that don't know, your twin sister is TK Wonder, who,
Yes.
I love and you love very much. I think we mutually, I mean, you obviously have more history, but we mutually love her. And, I just think that your guys' relationship is so special and so great. And I think you guys are really interesting in great in the way that you like to say how much you love each other so much. I mean, it's really great. So,
Yeah. I mean, my sister's my heart. I mean,
yeah,
we're identical. I mean, you can tell us apart, but
yeah,
we're identical. And I think identical twins have a very special bond because,
yeah.
we were one person at one point in time and split into two. And, I never really had to find my soulmate because I always had one. And so I just feel like pretty much the
Who's, ol-
luckiest woman in the world.
who's older?
I am by 15 minutes.
Ooh, so much
Hmm.
older. And then something else I really like about both of you is which like initially I think I met you together and then her and I kind of started, hang out a bit more. But what I initially, my like main thing that I was so drawn to you both was besides, how gorgeous you both are, is that you guys are these influencers, but you have always had a message, which is, I don't know anyone else that was doing that, especially when I first became aware of you guys. You would post a beautiful picture of yourself, but there would always be a really important message attached to it, which I thought was such a unique way of doing it. And also, you guys were kind of like, getting like sneaking it in there in a great way. I thought, because the influencer world we know is very vapid, but you were doing it in such a deep way and impactful way. I love it. I tell her all the time, but I want to tell you too. It was very, really influential, to be honest, in a great way. So
Thank you, Damon. I mean, TK and I have all, I think for us, I think a lot of people were like, oh, well, how can you mix in like social
yep,
issues with fashion? And I think it was really easy for TK and I to just, I mean, we've been talking about these issues ever since before even Instagram was in existence. So,
yeah,
and I think that's just the way that we were raised. Our
yeah,
mother and father were very into politics and social issues. So we cared about those things at a very young age. And, I talked about when I first came to New York, I worked with this organization called Free, and they basically worked with family members whose sons, mainly young black men, that were incarcerated under the Rockefeller law. And this was like a law that was enforced in 1973 by the governor at that time. His name was Nelson Rockefeller. And, he had like ambition to become president, but he was a Republican and people thought that he was too liberal as a Republican. So he created these Rockefeller laws, and they were the most atrocious laws that you could ever think of. So if you were in possession of 4 ounces of narcotics. So this means if you were in possession of 4 ounces of just cannabis, you could get 15 years to life in jail, 15 years to life. Second degree murder has less charges. And if you were selling narcotics, and this includes cannabis, if you were caught with 2 ounces and you were selling it, the minimum time you would get would be 25 years to life. So under these Rockefeller laws, they destroyed Black and brown communities. So what happened is in Black and brown communities, they were sending them to jail. But in white communities, when younger white men or women were caught with these amounts of cannabis, they would get sent to rehabilitation or counseling. And that wasn't happening in Black and brown communities. And eventually, what happened in New York under the Rockefeller laws, then 49 states took up similar laws to the Rockefeller laws here in New York. So I worked with this organization called Free, and I was helping them. They were amazing. They were trying to create reforms in the Rockefeller laws. And, you know, I think a lot of times people need to know like the history and how the system works against Black and brown communities, because a lot of people aren't aware of these things, you know?
Well, I have encouraged every person I know to just watch 13th. I think 13th explains it so perfectly. 13th to me is not opinion, it's facts, you know, it's fact-based, and it's basically like, I think they should show it in schools. You know, they should, like 13th to me is like, so, you know, A, B, C, D, it lays it out for you in a way that makes so much sense, and there's no, it's not open for debate after watching 13th. I mean, it is exactly what that is to me. So I've encouraged everyone to see 13th. So
yeah, and another one that's good. My sister recommended to me. It was called Just Mercy with with Brian Stevenson. And in the actually, if you read the book, there was just a small encounter that he was talking about when he was, I think, a very young lawyer, and there was an incident with him and like just moved to this new neighborhood, and then 2 policemen were suspicious of him. Someone called the police because they saw a Black male in a car, and he was just listening to his music. And long story short, he exited out his car, you know, they pulled their guns out, and he talked about, even though he was a lawyer and he knew the legal system, he was tempted to run, because in Black and brown communities, we don't look at the police force and the law enforcement as someone that protects and serves us. We look at them as someone to be afraid of, to not trust. So a lot of times when you see situations happen with, you know, young Black men, and everything changes in between these altercations between law enforcement and Black and brown communities, it's because there's a distrust there. We know what happens when we're in the legal system. And you're lucky enough if you come out alive. And that's not an exaggeration, unfortunately.
yeah. Before we get into, you know, like I said, what we're here to talk about, I just want to, so were you born in Maryland?
Yes, I was born
in Baltimore. You were born and raised there, right?
Born and raised, yes.
And so, you know, I always think in general, it's kind of, you know, where you're from, and you're kind of like, you know, 9, 10, 11, 12, those are really formative years for everybody. You know, I think those are really important years. What do you think, kind of like, either whether it be Maryland or a person, or what were your main influences during that time in your life, do you think? Kind of like shaping you?
I mean, I have to say my mother and my father, and, you know,
Yeah.
Tika and I have talked about our father, and, you know, we didn't have a good relationship with him because, you know, we talked about this openly. He, you know, abused us physically, and it was a very tumultuous and violent relationship in our childhood. But, you know, on that end, I do have to say that my father taught me a lot of things. You know, my mother's an angel, and she's the one woman that I always have looked up to and inspired to be. But, you know, I have to say with that, our father taught us a lot of things because he was caught up in the system. You know, he was incarcerated for a long time. And I've seen personally what the system does to, you know, brilliant Black and brown men. And, you know, our father was highly intelligent. You know, I mean, he could fix anything. He was like an engineer, like anything, cars to like he was just amazing. He was math. He was incredible. He was an incredible singer. He was almost like a prodigy because he could pick anything up and learn it immediately. But unfortunately, because of his, you know, his background and his past and what he experienced within the system and growing up, you know, without a father. And I'm sure that, you know, his father was in the system as well. You know, I saw what it did to him, and unfortunately, he couldn't overcome those traumas, and he passed those traumas onto us. And you know, luckily, with our mother's help, Tika and I were able to break those traumas, so we wouldn't pass it on to the next generation. But you know, I do have to say, you know, this is why I really encourage people to read the book Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson, because he talks about if you're not in proximity of communities, Black and brown marginalized communities, then you don't know what's going on. And we grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, but we grew up in the county part. But on the weekends when we were younger, and a lot of people don't know this, our dad would drive through Baltimore City like in the evening, and he'd be like, this will happen to you if you get hooked on drugs, if you don't get your education. So we were very, like at very young ages, like I remember like 6 or 7, and it stayed with me my entire time. But, you know, if you're not aware of those kind of communities, then a lot of people live in bubbles. So they like altercations and murders of like George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery are just rare occurrences, but they happen almost every day in Black and brown communities. But you don't know that if you're not exposed to it.
Well, I think if we learned anything from the last few weeks, is learned that people, number one, are choosing to ignore it and definitely living in a bubble. But I think even more than living in a bubble, they're choosing to not see it. I mean, it's a choice. I mean, they don't want to see it, basically. But
I mean, but also too, like the system, you know, we've been talking a lot about like systemic racism. You know, the system is built to keep people in a bubble. Like, you know, the more divided we are as a race, the easier it is to conquer and, you know, benefit from things that, so a lot of times people are like, oh, you know, I was never aware of it. But, you know, we started in, even from young ages and learning about our history in school and how history usually tells one narrative. I know some people have had teachers that have taught them about history, and my sister talked about how, you know, Black history doesn't start with people that have been enslaved. We come from, you know, kings and queens and kingdoms and empires. But, you know, you don't learn that kind of history in the United States.
Well, so, you know, I think two things too. I think it's a great thing that systematic racism is a term that we're using in our country very commonly these days. I mean, I think it's going to, you know, like you're saying, people are going to, it's a term, a common term right now. And oppression, those are two terms that are very common that we weren't even using so commonly 3 months ago. So I think that those are I think good things in the end. And I've learned a lot myself about systematic racism in the past, you know, month or whatever myself. So, you know, I think those are all really good things. That is a good thing, you know, I think right now. So maybe that's, you know, my thing, but.
Yeah, no, I mean, I absolutely agree. I mean, I think a lot of people are becoming more aware, especially communities outside of Black and brown communities are becoming more aware, you know, hopefully.
And like we said, you know, it's not for debate. It is, you know, these are hard facts. So anyone that wants to debate it, I'm like, then you're choosing to be a racist. You know what I mean? That you are. You okay? Am I freezing or you're freezing? Oh, you're frozen now.
Hold on.
Holding, boo. Am I frozen or are you frozen?
Hey. Oh, hey, Damon, you were cutting out or anything. Okay, you're good now. Okay.
Can you see me?
Yes, I can see you. Yeah, I can see you and hear you now.
I think we're okay then, right? You let me know if it's freeze okay. Also, you know, a less serious question. I also want to know kind of where do you get your sense of, can you see me? Oh, it's frozen. Okay. It's kind of delayed. Okay, TK is saying we're not frozen. Where do you get your sense of style from? What are your style influences?
Hey TK, I didn't see her on. Okay, we're frozen again. I'm just going to keep talking. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. Hello?
I mean, ever since we were little, I can remember her style, and she was just so. Hello?
Should we maybe
You can
hang
hear
up
me
and do it
though,
again?
or no?
Yeah, but I'm gonna
Yes.
hang up.
So I just asked if people could
I'm
hear
gonna
me.
hang
So
up right now. We'll just say again.
okay, you're gonna hang up.
Well, I don't know. What do you think? People say they can see us. It's freezing. You're freezing us. I can't really hear you is the issue.
Okay, I'm not freezing on my. They said just keep talking because instead they can hear
okay,
and see us
we'll keep
fine.
going. So
Um,
I couldn't really hear. So again, who are your style influences?
I would say my mother. I mean, she just
Got
had
it.
such an eclectic style, and she was also corporate field, but she was also like loved to sing, and she was in a band when she was younger, and
Oh, amazing.
always had like she would wear a suit one day, and on the weekend wear a sequin dress, and she was just incredible, and she had no
My kind of
worries
girl.
about acting. Yeah. And also
Well, I
TK
haven't
was
met.
also influence as well. TK,
I
because
haven't.
I think because TK's been into music for so long, so I was in the fashion industry, and she was in the music industry. So for me, I felt like she had more freedom, and I kind of got caught up in all the stereotypes and whatever into the fashion industry. But
Well, first of all, I haven't met your mother, but in my head, I have a very clear, picture of who she is. I think she watched when TK was on, and I already love her. I already heart your mom. So you mean so?
she knows who you are, so she sends her love too.
And so, one of the questions I was going to ask you earlier, but I just want to kind of clarify. So you basically have told me that you got your voice, because I was really curious where you both got your strong voices from, to just kind of speak up about things that you feel passionate about. And you're saying basically your parents, right? Your two parents.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. Because I was really curious. Like I've always been so, you guys are just so articulate and so too direct, and so people aren't like that. It's very rare, and it's very. I do love that about you guys very much. So just want to say it again.
Thank you so much, Damon.
And then because you talked about working in fashion. What are your, because I remember, again, I don't know if you were with TK, but I remember, when I was like, that is my girl, end of story. When she wrote on her Instagram that you guys, or I think you probably together at a fashion show that was supposed to be, diversity in fashion show, and there was not one black person in the front row or in the fashion show. So, I've never understood that about fashion. Like, why is, what are your thoughts on lack of diversity in fashion, kind of briefly, but.
Well, we talk about this often, and I mean, I love that everyone's feeling very comfortable and talking about systemic racism within the fashion industry, because it's very prevalent. On that note as well, a lot of people weren't being as direct about the racism or discrimination that they would experience, inclusivity within the industry, because they didn't feel as comfortable, because let's be honest, it might affect your bank. So instead of brands being open and being sensitive to listening about what's going on in their own corporations and how they can be more a lot of people would get offended and get sensitive about it and would close up and wouldn't really want to speak about these issues, because then you have to take a long, hard look within your own company and see all the flaws within that, and how you have how you have continued this systemic construct for so long. So that's
The
not easy
structure.
to do.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's good to see
Yes.
that some companies are really genuinely doing the work to make those changes, but then also too, there are also many companies that are doing it just virtue signaling, like it's not coming from a genuine foundation, not a like a chance to make real changes. And so a lot of people were hesitant about that, because at the end of the day, like, you have to pay your rent, and
you gotta pay
for
your.
us, yes, and for us, it just wasn't quite as easy to keep our mouth closed, because we just always been talking about these issues. So for us, it came very natural to be open about what we were experiencing because it was the truth and it was happening often.
Yeah. No, I love that about you guys. Again, I keep saying it, but so I do think the key word that everything you just said, it's the work. It is a lot of work. So the company or they have to want to do the work and rebuild, their whole system in a lot of ways. And then, like you're saying, all these companies kind of, they're you can tell when it's ingenuine right now, the last couple of weeks, you can tell who means it and who doesn't, basically. I think it's very clear, and I'm glad that these companies are getting called out as well for being ingenuine. I think they're getting called out quite a bit right now. So
yeah,
I like
they
that.
are. Yes. And, but also, I talked about this like recently, also have to understand the intentional side of it. So a lot of people are like, oh, they know what they're doing. The intentional, systemic racism construct of it. And I was like, I was asking people to explore that, sometimes it is unintentional. And that's why, systemic racism construct has been so successful for, decades and decades, because people that think that they aren't racist actually are. So, so instead of trying to fight and create changes to change those behaviors, they become defensive and sensitive. Yeah. And those are all mechanisms to protect the systemic racism.
The system, the system.
That's all part of it. Right.
Well, I think like something that even in the past couple of days, there's like a meme going around that you guys posted on your other page is that people do get defensive when they don't realize that they are being racist. You see what I'm saying? So it's a natural way of like controlling the situation or something. But
right. Also too, you don't want to be called a racist because it's not something that's good.
Let's be clear. Racism. Let's be clear for the record. Racism is very bad. Let's be clear. I mean,
right. And and also too, like people, but to make those changes, you have to acknowledge who. It's just like anything. You're an alcoholic. You have to acknowledge that you're an alcoholic, so you can make the just to become not an alcoholic. So it's the same thing, and I think a lot of times people have to understand at the heart of racism is ignorance. So, especially when we talk about, inclusivity and diversity in the fashion industry, their systems have been set in place for years and years and years and years and years and years and years. So for people to become very successful in this racist construct, you as a Black or brown person have to assimilate closest to that person that benefits the most from that construct, and that is the white communities. So I think people need to understand that racism is ignorance, and every single one of us is always, we're ignorant in some way. No one on this planet knows everything in the world. And so I think people that are beginning to realize like, oh, I've been racist, like that's ignorance. Acknowledge it and work on making real changes so you can create actions. I mean, like this is not a death sentence like cancer. This is, I mean, in the end, we could make an analogy that is similar to cancer, but yes, I mean, these are behaviors that you can change if you want to change them.
That's a really great way of looking at it. It's a really interesting way. Good.
Yeah.
So one more thing before we get into your story is that, the Black Trans Lives Matter protests in Brooklyn last Sunday was 15,000 people, which I was personally like kind of blown away. I thought it was amazing. And, I'm obviously so happy. It was tons of my straight Black male friends were there. It was so supported and so amazing. Are you frozen? Dang, why does it keep... Oh, are you frozen or no? Got it? Can you hear me?
I'm a frozen now.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so I was just saying, the Black Trans Lives Matter protest was, lots of my Black straight male friends, and it was very supported by, kind of like, a very diverse group of people. But why do you think, because, and I was pretty blown away by that, why do you think that it's kind of a new to the Black Lives Matter conversation, Black trans lives? matter? Why do you think that's like, it's kind of new to that conversation, I think. Do you? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, especially when we talk about, I think if we want to even break it down, like between like Black communities regarding like homosexuality in general.
Yeah.
It's, I think, something within communities that we really haven't addressed at a young age, just in general, that, you know, showing your emotions, it's like, oh.
Yeah.
And being vulnerable is looked at as something as weakness. And, you know, as you get older, you learn that is quite the opposite. To be vulnerable is a very strong action, like feeling on the inside and not caring about you when you express your true emotion. Communities that's suppressed. And that goes within a lot of Black communities. You know, also too, when the father in a lot of Black communities fall taken out of the home at very early ages, you know, a lot due to incarcerations, high incarcerations within the United States, emotions are suppressed. So I think that's a lot of work that has to still be done with. This is why I encourage people to like really do your research and know your history, because in a lot of cultures around the world, people that are homosexual are considered to be like a guy, and they're looked at very highly because tuned to both sexualities. So it's looked at as something that's positive and beautiful, and community go for them for guidance and wisdom. So, you know, again, this is again falling into different prejudices, because we're like, oh, well, you know, Black people racist because racism at the heart means that you are in a position. The 10 richest men in the entire world are white men. So, you know, they control all the constructs, you know, and benefit from those constructs and are similar to who they are and what they look like and the color of their skin, benefit from those same constructs that they're controlling. So they have the power. But in Black communities, we can be prejudiced. So, you know, you can have prejudices against other people of the same color. And that goes with the same as discrimination. Prejudice is just taking your thoughts and then you make them into action, like, and usually it's violent acts. Because, you know, you can also be prejudiced, but it doesn't always have to be negative. Like when they say like, oh, you know, Jamaicans, they're hard workers, they have like 10 jobs. You know, that's positive, but it's not always true. So prejudice or bad prejudice. But yeah, again, this all falls into like stereotypes in ignorant communities, no matter, you know, are.
Okay, so it's kind of fuzzy, so I just want to make sure that, you know, I think you cut out earlier, TK was saying, but okay, so first of all, I want to talk about, you know, what happened to you. You were racially profiled and then inevitably arrested, correct? Okay, so first of all, I'm sorry that happened to you. I just want to say that first. But I want you to maybe, you know, please share that story with us. You mean?
Yeah, sure. You know, so I was at a dinner with my sister. It was a work dinner. We're out with a PR team. And after dinner, everyone's having a great time. And they're like, oh, you know, we're going to this venue to play. Do you want to join us? And if anyone knows my sister and I very well, I tend to be, I mean, my sister's a homebody, but she loves to off out and dance. Which is why you and her are like the best of friends, not only because you both are like incredible and beautiful people, but you know, you also know how to get down on the dance floor, whether anybody is on there or not. So my sister, for one rare occasion, is like, oh no, I'm gonna go home. So if anyone knows us, they know that I would be the one that would be going home. So I will contest to that.
I will contest to that. I think you've been to 1 or 2 of my parties total. Love you.
Yeah, so, you know, So I wind up going to this venue. It was in Williamsburg. Immediately when I walked in, I was the only woman of color from where I could see. And as I walk in, we walk into the venue, I get shoved, like violently. It wasn't like a little, ooh, like, you know, propelled so forward, propelled so hard that was like a big thrust. So I had like, and I saw someone go by me and I said, excuse me. And I said loudly, I was like, excuse me, can you watch where you're going? And immediately it was a large white male. And he turned around and he said, what did you say? And I said, excuse me, sir. So I said, excuse me, sir, because I noticed he was older. I said, excuse me, sir, can you? And I couldn't even finish. Immediately, my arms were pulled behind my back and I was handcuffed. So at this point, I didn't know that they were police officers. So they were undercover. So they were in plainclothes. I had no idea. Even as my hands were being placed by me, pulled into handcuffs, I still had no idea that there were police officers because it was just happening so fast. So once I was in handcuffs, they pushed me forward and I was dragged from the four. So it was 4 police officers. And I was dragged out the venue into the back. I was dragged, literally. I couldn't walk. I was dragged. And what was going through my mind was, I thought I was getting abducted. Like, I thought like I was getting kidnapped. Plain sight. It did not translate that these were police officers because they were in plain clothes. So dragged out into the venue in a very dark area. Oh, can you see me? Or I think I froze, but as long as you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Okay.
Hello?
Yes. Yes. And someone said, just excuse me. Yes, exactly what happened. So I was dragged out into the back of the venue in a very dark area, thrown against the wall, right? Because, you know, again, I have no idea that they're police officers. Like, maybe if I were police officers, I wouldn't have resisted. Maybe I would have tried to like talk myself to get out of this situation. But again, I thought anything, this whole time I'm resisting, because this is what you do, right? If you think you're getting kidnapped or abducted, you instantly go into fight or flight mode. It wasn't like, oh, let me fight, let me not. You instantly try to get out of that situation, right? So I'm like thrown up against the brick wall and they pat me down. And again, all this is going on. It's happening so fast, still no idea. So when they pat me down and a police car, an unmarked white van, I was like, I had no idea. I was frightened. Soon as they're taking me to the van, I'm continuing to resist. And then finally they're like, don't resist. You're stop resisting. So when they said you're under arrest, that's when it translated these were police officers. So when I'm pushed to precinct, what am I getting charged for? What am I getting arrested for? That please run my ID, prior criminal charges. I've never been, I have no criminal history, no prior record. Please check. I'm asking you, please, what am I being? No one would answer me. And then after minutes, they were like, basically told me to be quiet in so many words. So I'm taken to the precinct cell. And this is when I'm like, you have to tell me what I'm being charged for. And they're like, well, I need my phone call. I was like, I want my phone call. And then they did not give me my phone call. So for this went on for like about maybe over an hour when another officer came to in front of my holding cell. And this was a Hispanic woman. So the races of the officers. So the one that solidified me being arrested was the older white male. And then there was another younger male, I believe, and 2 Hispanic officers. So, and one of them was a female officer. So came to my holding cell and basically was like, do you know the game of chess? And I was like, yes. And she was like, well, you know, for you to get, you have to give us over something like that. And I was like, look, I don't have time for this. This is not a game for me. I was like, I just want my one phone call. And at this time, because they weren't telling me what I charged for, I was refusing to have my mug taken and to be fingerprinted. So I refused it. And they were like, well, if you give us that, then we're not giving you your phone call. So they were trying to get like a tit for tat thing. And at this point, I was really frustrated. And it was also, so there was a bunch of different emotions going on. So I was scared. But then once I realized that they were police officers, I was also becoming frustrated and angry, and hopelessness came over me because I was like, I know how the legal works for Black and brown people. And I know how police officers will lie to get what they want. And I know there's
and get away and get away with it. And get away with it. You mean
yes,
lie and get away with it? No.
Yes, and get away with it quite often. So, you know, besides being scared and angry and frustrated and hopelessness, like all these emotions came over me. So when I was in there, I began talking to myself. I was like, I'm scared. So I want my family to know where I am. So I finally was like, look, if I can get my phone call, you can take my fingerprints and mugshot me. And you know, before that, they basically had threatened me and said, do it, we'll just make you do it. And I said, what do you mean by, are you going to get physical with me? And they wouldn't answer me. So at that point, I was getting scared that my family had no idea where I was. So all this time that's happening, the group of people that I went with to the venue, one of them had asked the officers where were they taking me, and the officer would not tell them what precinct I was going to. So that person wound up calling my sister. So while all this is happening, my sister's calling all these different precincts in the area where she thinks that I might be, because the officer at the scene wouldn't give the person in the party that I was with the location of where I was staying. But I didn't know this at the time. So at this point, I'm just like, I'm scared. I don't even know where I am. So at this point, It's like me feeling safe, because it's funny, right, Damon? Like, you feel that you as an individual, a citizen of this country, should feel protected under those who are supposed to protect and serve you. But for a Black and brown person, we feel quite the opposite. When we're in those situations, we know how it can turn drastically, and we might not come out of it alive. So at this point, I was just like, I would just want to let my mother know. So I called my mother, and, you know, after all this happened, when I get to the end of my story, I just want to mention that my twin sister told me when I was finally released, she was like, you write the details of your story like now. So when we got home, I found everything that happened from start to finish, because she's like, you might forget some details. And I'm glad she made me do that. Even though I didn't do it, she said, a good idea. And I'm glad I listened to her, because I remember when I got my phone call, I didn't use the phone from the police station. The officer used his personal cell phone. And I thought that was really strange. I was like, why is he giving me his cell phone? My mom from? Why can't I just use the telephone? It was right there. The precinct's phone was right there. And I later found out because they record all phone calls going in and out. So potentially what I'm saying to my mother could be used against them, because they knew that they took me in for erroneous charges. Like, I shouldn't have even been in there for the first place. So any of that could have been used as evidence. So later it made sense why he chose to give me his cell phone and use the precinct's telephone. But that's something I might not would have remembered if, you know, my sister was like, you know, you down these details now. So anyway, I called my mother was like, look, just go through the process and we'll start working this out on our end. So at this time, I didn't have a lawyer. And I say this because I had a lawyer, I might have been able to been released in the precinct before they took me to central bookings. So central bookings is like the main jail that's connected to the courthouse before you have your arraignment. So I was in the precinct holding cell for about 2 hours. So I got my mother, and she was in, you know, all the way across the country at the time, so she couldn't get to me. I had my mugshot taken taken and I was fingerprinted. As I'm going through this process, the police officers, the large white male, laughing. So I see him outside of the area where I'm having this taken, and he was literally laughing at me while I was getting my mug taken and fingerprinted. And I remember too, also when they ran my ID, saw that I had no prior criminal history, I heard one of the officers say, "Oh, she doesn't have a criminal history." So he automatically assumed, because I was a younger Black woman, that I had some kind of criminal past. You know, it doesn't matter. Like, you know, I looked like I just came out of a 70s Woodstock, like, festival, Damon. I had this long, flowy dress to my ankle, you know, but that's when it just doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter what you sound like. Times people in the system only see the color of your skin, and
it's literally skin color. It's just skin. It's just as simple as skin color. Yeah, I get it. You mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So this happened. Then I was transferred to Central Bookings, and when you're taking Central Bookings, I had to get my mugshot taken again. I didn't have to do, thankfully, but they do a pat down. You have to speak to, I think it's social services, someone that they just ask you, are you pregnant, and just medical, so they know if, you know, you need any kind of medication. So as all this is going on, the Hispanic officer that was at the scene, who was part of the arrest, actually said to me, because he wound up speaking to my mother too as well, said that he didn't know why I was in there. He's like, he didn't know why I was getting arrested, but he was like, I'm sure you'll get out soon. So another detail I forgot to mention. So on the way, they couldn't find a parking spot in front of Central Bookings, so they or whatever, but you're the police and you can't escort me out of the police. They parked like 5 blocks away. So when they were transferring me to Central Bookings, it was during rush hour. So like so there were a lot of families taking their children to school. Police car, I had my hands behind my back, I was handcuffed. And I remember walking families' faces, and the kids like were just curious. They were just wondering what was going on. But I saw the like disdain, and like, you know, the parents kind of pulling their children closer to them. And a lot of times, even though you know that you have not done anything wrong, you still feel I was
No, it's cutting out.
embarrassed.
I can't hear you. Can you hear me? You're cutting out again. Hold on. Can you hear me? Figure it out. Oh, she's gone. She's gonna come back in. Guys, I'm so glad you're, oh, here she is. Perfect. Okay. Thank you all for watching.
can you hear me now?
Yeah. So the last thing you were saying is you were getting out of the car and the kids saw you and you started, the parents saw you and you said you were embarrassed, which to be honest is so horrible for you to feel embarrassed. You mean like you didn't do anything. You mean,
right.
So.
And you know, even though I know that I didn't do anything wrong, oh, hey, Fashion Bomb Daily, or just sorry.
Hey, Claire.
Claire. Yeah, even though I know I didn't do anything wrong, there's still a stigma that's placed on people when you are arrested and incarcerated, whether you're guilty or not.
Yep.
So, you know, these white families that were taking their children to school were looking at me and like disdain and, you know, automatically assuming that I did something wrong.
Yep.
But, you know, as we know, and as you know, a lot of times in Black and brown communities, if you're arrested, my first question is, well, what's the whole story? Because a lot of times, you know, we as a people are arrested on erroneous charges. I'm not saying that's always the case, but, you know, a lot of times within the legal system, police officers need to make a quota for the day. It's part of their job. So you'll get people arrested and incarcerated for even been taken or arrested or incarcerated. So as I'm walking to Central Bookings, you know, I'm feeling all these feelings, and even though I did feel a little bit embarrassed by what was going on, it didn't deflect me and how much I felt that kind of like walked with my head high to Central Booking.
I know you did. I know you did.
I did have all these, but I knew. Yeah, I sure did, because also
you did.
With being embarrassed, I was also very angry.
Yep.
Because I felt that, you know, for them to be like, oh, well, you know, if you behave, what is as a Black and brown person in this country? I was considered a model citizen. I had no prior criminal history. I'm a writer. Like, what is behaving? What is good behavior? It means that you are not supposed to address a white male and ask him to stop pushing you. So because of that, yes, I can be arrested for that, because that's not good behavior. That's not staying in line. But, you know, if you understand the history of the police force and how it was all created to monitor and keep Black people in line, then you understand today why this happens all the time. So taken to Central Bookings, and as the police, younger Hispanic police tells me that he doesn't know why I'm in there, but, you know, just stay calm and, you know, I'm sure you'll be out shortly. So what they're doing now is they're taking me to the women's division of the jail at Central Bookings, and as I'm going, I have to pass through the men's division. So at the time, this is when all the protests were going on for Freddie Gray.
Yep.
So Freddie Gray was another young male that was murdered by police officers. So it was just a few days ago that my sister and I were at the protest for Freddie Gray. This is in 2015. So a lot of people assumed that I was a protester. They thought I was in jail for protest. So as I'm walking through the men's division, like a couple of them, the men that actually say like, oh, you know, Urban Bush Babes, they got you, because Urban Bush Babes was my website I was like still heavily involved with at the time. And I kind of just looked at them and nodded and was like, yeah. So as I get
famous in jail, right?
I don't know about famous, but someone did recognize me. They didn't want to be recognized, so you know, it was fine. So I went to the women's division, and I was put in a smaller holding cell with maybe about, I don't know, maybe like 20, maybe 15 to 20 women. I'm just
cutting out. Hello? Can you hear me?
Hello?
Yeah, I think we're good.
You can hear me, Damon? Yes, I can hear you. So
You're coming.
I think my picture keeps freezing, but long as you can hear me.
Okay. I'll let you know if I can't hear you. So you're going to the women's holding area.
central bookings
Yeah.
and 15 to 20 women. And then eventually, like within maybe about like over an hour, 2 hours, and transferred to a larger holding cell with about like 35 to 40 women. You know, and in this cell, they have one toilet. There's no walls or anything like that. So it's just one toilet in the middle of the cell. So if you have to go to the bathroom, everyone sees you. So this was one of the reasons why I refused to eat. Also, too, because I just didn't trust anything, and that included the food that was being given in the time that I was there. So from the time that I was in the precincts to central bookings jail, it was a total of 18 hours. So I refused to eat for that time because I just didn't want to first go to the bathroom in front of everyone, and also didn't trust the food. But, you know, within that time, there were women in there that were up for armed robbery. Someone was up for stabbing her boyfriend almost to death. There was one woman that overdosed literally in the jail. And then there was like a prostitute ring in there. And so everyone assumed that I was in there for protesting. So they asked me, you know, what I was in there for. And I told them, and they kind of just like shook their head. Like they already knew. Like they knew that I shouldn't have been in there, but they also understood why I was there. And I told this story before, but it was like a prostitute ring that was in there. So it was like 6 women. And, you know, I was telling them my story. And then after I finished, they said, like, you know, don't worry, baby girl. That's what they called me. Like, don't worry, baby girl. We'll protect you. And, you know, in that moment, like, I even looked at that as a blessing because some of the women in there were very angry, and the guards that were monitoring the sections were very slow to respond to things. So, you know, if I encountered some angry women that just felt like they wanted to do anything they wanted to do, including being, you know, violent towards me, but that was quite the opposite. And I listened to these women's stories, and they were just so beautiful, even though they unfortunately were caught in the system where they felt that they needed to do certain things to survive. And I felt like, who am I to judge? They were showing me love, they were being friendly, and I was just blessed to get to meet them and know them, and they like protected me while I was in there. So that was a blessing in itself. But long story, finally, so this means the whole time waiting for me. And I didn't know she was there. So my sister is like, not leaving until I am released. So I remember there was one point when I found out later, one of her friends was like, oh, you know, she's not getting out today. It's the weekend. She's going to be in there. And my sister was like, well, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'll be there until she gets out. So if she's in there for the weekend, I'll be there for the weekend. And, you know, that's kind of the relationship my sister and I have.
Yeah.
And if I knew that she was waiting there for me, I think that would have brought some kind of sense of relief to what I was saying. But since I didn't know that she was there, I didn't know if anyone knew where I was at that moment.
Wow.
But I finally get to see my lawyer. So what happens is I'm the last person to see my lawyer. I don't have a personal lawyer at this time. So they send you, you know, your appointed attorney, your public defender. So everyone went before me. The prostitute ring went before me. The woman that was up for, you know, almost stabbing her boyfriend to death, for armed robbery. So when I finally did get to see my lawyer, he looked at the details of my case and kind of just shook his head. And he's like, I don't even understand why you're in here.
You're like me?
And, yeah, he just looked at it and he was like, you shouldn't be in here. And he's like, honestly, he's like, and also the fact that you're here, you're the last one that I see and under these charges. So what they charged me with was, I didn't find out my charges until I spoke to my public defender. It was like excessive force against a police officer, resisting arrest. So excessive force is using my voice. I did not touch this police officer. So using my voice to ask him to stop pushing me. Excessive force, arresting arrests because they were in plain clothes. So I did not know they were police officers. I thought I was getting kidnapped. So I was in actuality just fighting for my life, and impeding an investigation. So they were at the venue for something else and said that I impeded their investigation. I got in the way of their investigation. Which made no sense, because why did you arrest me and take all that time to put your focus on me if I was impeding some investigation that you were focusing on? It just made no sense. So he saw my case and was like, look, this was going to happen. You're going to see the judge. They'll probably give you like a year for good behavior. This is for good behavior. But he's like, my suggestion to you is if you want to file a civil suit, I think there's a lawyer that might take your case. But he's like, that's up to you. And I told him, yes, without hesitation. Not because I was like, oh, I want to get them back. I was traumatized, and I wanted some kind of justice because I felt the system that was supposed to protect me did not. And I wanted someone to understand that and see all the injustices about the system and the incident that I was in, and how, long story short, how insanely messed up it was. So I see the judge, and I'm taken out to see the judge. So finally I get to see that my sister is there and my two uncles are there as well, because they lived in New York at the time. Right. So as soon as I see my sister, a wash of relief comes over me, because I'm beginning to feel safe.
Yeah.
So when I see the judge kind of shakes her head. She's a Black woman. And I think she looked at my case, and you could see her expression on her face. And it was almost like she didn't have to say a word, but it was almost like, I can't believe that you're here. So basically what happened is I got probation with good behavior. My record would be expunged. So this is before I decided to go for a civil suit. So finally I go to my sister, I give her a big, and when I'm in my sister's arms, that's when I began to cry. And there were so many moments when I was incarcerated that I just wanted to cry, but I didn't feel safe. And this is what I'm talking about when we talk about Black and brown communities, not showing your emotions, because emotions is seen as weakness, and I didn't want to seem weak while I was in jail. So, I held back. And holding your emotions back in Black and brown communities is very common, and it causes a lot of stress mentally and physically. That's another topic for another time, Damon. But I didn't want to seem weak, which is ridiculous, because showing your emotions, as I said, be beautiful and very strong. It's just a strong act to do, but stereotypes. And when I was in my sister's arms, I finally cried. I let it all out, because I felt safe. I knew that I was with my family, and I knew I was with people that loved and wanted to protect me. So after all that happened, that's when my sister encouraged me to write everything that happened down, because she was like, you're going to forget certain things. And she was like, if you want to do a civil suit, you need to remember details of your story. And she was right, even though all I wanted to do was go to bed and go to sleep and not get out of bed for the next few weeks. But I did that, and I met with the attorney that my public defender suggested. He recommended me. So I saw this attorney. He looked at my case, and he's like, I'll take it pro bono. So this is another advantage that I had, because attorney fees are extremely expensive, and that prevents a lot of people from taking action against police departments and law enforcement in general, because of attorney fees. And luckily I had an attorney that was willing to take it pro bono, because he said that for him it looked like a case that was pretty obvious that I was wrongfully arrested. So what happens is, when you file a civil suit, I'll go quickly, there's a amount of time that you have to file a civil suit. So for instance, if you're brutalized and an altercation with the police force, and you are brutally beaten, let's say you need 6 months to recover, or I mean, I'm sure the process of healing is years and years and years, but I'm just using for example, say you take 6 months to recover and finally
Oh,
like, okay, I want to
hold
press
on. I'm sorry to
charges.
cut you off. It's gonna, you know, it hangs up after 1 hour, so it's 23 seconds remaining. So I'm gonna hang up right now and just go back on, okay?